Hello everyone and welcome to day 15 of our emergency series, Mayday 15. So we are halfway through the month already, so let me know in the comments if you have kept up with every single one so far. That's awesome. I appreciate all of you for joining me on this month-long journey. So today we are talking about cabin fires in flight. Now, a fire on board an aircraft is one of the worst problems to have, right? If you ever find yourself in the situation, the goal is to get the plane on the ground as safely and as quickly as possible. So how do you know if you have a fire on board the aircraft? So maybe you're picturing a smoke-filled cockpit, flames all over the place, and you're like, what do you mean, how do you know if you have an onboard fire? But hopefully you don't ever get to this point of a flame-filled cockpit, right? At first, there might be some very subtle signs. Maybe you smell a slight burning odor. Maybe you see a tripped circuit breaker. Maybe you just have some random avionics failures or odd instrument behavior, right? Maybe there's faint smoke starting to work its way into the cabin of the aircraft. Now, cabin smoke or fire can originate from various sources, right? It could be smoke from the engine creeping into the cockpit. It could be smoke from an electrical system coming from under the panel. The key here is to shut down the source of the fire. So if you suspect electrical fire, right, shut off the master switch and ventilate the cabin. Did this solve the problem? Is the cabin air freshening up? If so, great. Now you have two options, right? You can keep it off and just land somewhere. Pick the closest, pilot controlled airport and just land with no radios. Or if you are really in a position where you need some electrical power, then you could start to troubleshoot and see if you can get some components back. But before you just flip the master back on, you would want to turn everything off individually. So do you even know how to turn everything off in your aircraft? Alternatively, you could just pull the avionics circuit breakers and that would turn them all off as well. Then flip the master on. If you start to smell smoke, flip it back off and land. But potentially it's fine, right? Then turn on COM 1, do you smell any smoke? If not, great, now you can talk on the radio. Now, you could keep going down this path and see what avionics you can bring back, but at this point, you might just want to call that a win and get on the ground and land as soon as possible. Now, what if it's an engine fire, right? This requires less fooling around and more immediate action. We aren't going to be doing too much troubleshooting here. The best thing in this situation is shut fuel off to the engine, make emergency descent, and find a place to land, right? In this scenario, you aren't spending lots of time looking for the perfect field, right? You're just looking for a landing place which is quick and survivable, right? So as you conduct a high-speed descent, the hope is that the airflow will extinguish the flames, right? But that's far from certain. If you see flames and you have a front seat passenger, you could use the fire extinguisher and put out the flames. They could use the fire extinguisher as you fly the airplane. Now, if you cannot tell if it's an electrical fire or engine fire, in this situation, you just want to shut everything off, descend and land, right? Shut off the fuel, shut off the electrical system, and then land. So on your checklist, you likely have procedures for an in-flight fire, but by the time you realize you have a fire, you want to have the steps memorized here and react from memory, right? You don't want to be like fiddling around with checklists until after the fire is out or after you are on the ground, right? So how would you help prevent in-flight fires then for these situations, right? So electrical fires can start when there's a short in your electrical system and it could cause an arc. So how this happens is that over time, chaffing can wear away the insulation on your wires. If it wears them down to the wires, two wires touch, then they could arc. Now, when this happens, it can cause the surrounding wiring and insulation and other flammable materials to start burning. And there you go, bam, electrical fire. So the good news is that when this initially happens, the fuel source for that fire is electricity. So if you shut the master switch off, you can usually stop the fire. Once other things start to burn though, now you're in trouble. So during your pre-flight, pay attention to the wiring. Do you see anything that looks frayed, worn insulation on the wires? Is anything loose? Does it look like a connection's bad, right? All of these things can be tips to help prevent electrical fires. So what can we look for on a pre-flight which might help prevent an engine fire then? Well, check for any fuel odor in the cabin or obvious leaks, inspect the engine compartment for stain, security, fuel hoses and related components, check the exhaust system. You know, this could dump hot gases into the engine compartment, which could melt the electrical wire insulation and could cause issues with the fuel lines, right? Wiggle things, make sure the connections are all tight. And then lastly, you know, you want to keep your engine compartment clean. Some of these old training aircraft out there, right? You look in the engine cowling and there's like grease or oil on the cowling, kind of a mess. That won't likely cause a fire, but for sure, it could help keep the fire going if it starts. So cabin fire in flight, it's a dangerous situation where you want to deal with it immediately. Thanks everyone for watching day 15. I look forward to seeing you all on day 16 and fly safe.